Last night there was a reception for some of the speakers, and as we were meeting each other, I was asked, "Who are you with?" And I had this sort of awkward moment, and I would say, "Oh, as this says, the University of San Francisco," or I could have listed other things that I do, because that's what I noticed people were saying. And but that actually has nothing to do with why I'm standing here in front of you today. By the end of today, I will have taken 37 pills, and if you translate that into a year, I take over 10,000 pills a year. And I depend on prescription drugs to stay alive, and I need them to be safe. So I have a very vested interest in what happens here and the discussion that happens here today. I'm going to talk about an experience I had, what I learned from that experience. But let me back up. I grew up in a small town in Northern California, 1,200 people, and Mr. Barry was our town pharmacist and our first line of defense in healthcare. So if I got sick, I remember my parents would take me to Mr. Barry and say, this is what's going on. And he would say, oh, try this, or it sounds like you need to go see the doc. But that's what I remember. And in 7th grade, I decided I wanted to be a pharmacist too. And Mr. Barry was very, very helpful. And I spend some time in the weekends, and he let me go behind the counter and watch what he did and answer all my questions, which I'm sure were a little overwhelming. But never once did I think to ask how the medicine got to his pharmacy. In fact, it would be years and years before I'd think to ask that question. I think I had this image of some sort of armored truck pulling up to the pharmacy and safely delivering all these drugs. I had no idea. I graduated from high school and moved into the dorms at the University of San Francisco, and taking classes that were challenging and exciting and meeting people from around the world. And I started dating, and I was in this amazing city of San Francisco. It was 1981, and life was really good. And then friends started getting sick, and we found there was this virus in 1984, HIV, and that's why everyone was getting sick. And my friends started dying. And then in 1988, I was sick and diagnosed myself. And I went on the only drug available at the time, AZT. It was a drug that we didn't know so much about, except it was the one hope we had. We were taking a lot. It made us pretty sick. And my friends were still dying. In the mid-90s, things became more hopeful as more drugs became available, and we learned about cocktails and combinations of drugs, and things were looking up. In the year 2000, though, I was diagnosed with HIV wasting syndrome, and that's where you lose a considerable amount of weight in a short amount of time. And I was being treated, but it had failed on the treatment. And there was one treatment left, and that was growth hormone, recombinant human growth hormone called Serostim, and you inject it daily. And I was fortunate enough to have an insurance company that approved a 12-month supply, which was pretty standard, a 6 or 12-month supply. And so I started injecting it with really positive results. And so things were good. And about halfway through, I noticed some stinging at the injection site. And I thought, oh no, I'm getting infections. But it just continued, and there was no infection. And the next day I'd wake up where I did the injection, and it would still sting. And I had had months of the experience with this drug, and that hadn't happened before. So I thought, I need to ask my pharmacist the next time I go in and pick this up. But it was the holidays. I was busy. I just ran in and picked it up, but I went home. And this drug comes in a diluent, or sterile water, and then a thing of white powder, and you mix the two together, dissolve it, and then you inject it. And the second batch didn't sting, but the amount of water in the vial wasn't always consistent. It was supposed to be 1 cc every time, and sometimes it was a little more, sometimes it was a little less. And I thought, not alarming, but also a little odd. So this time I went into my CVS pharmacy, asked for my pharmacist, and said, I had this stinging and now this problem with the water. Any idea of what's going on? Did I do something wrong before? Did I fix it? What's happening? And he just really nonchalantly said, oh, you should go home and check. You may have gotten some of the fake stuff. I was sure I didn't understand what he had said, and I probably looked surprised. And he explained that there had been a recall and that what was on the shelves had been sent back, but that I should check for myself to see if I had received some of the fake stuff, as he put it. And still not sure what he was talking about, I got on the bus and went home. And when I got home, I went online and found an article in the Boston Globe that said this drug had been counterfeited and found in major pharmacies in 7 states. So I immediately took what I just picked up at the pharmacy and some boxes and stuff out of the garbage and some that I hadn't taken yet, and really scrutinized, and I found there was a box that had some darker ink than the others and one that was missing a small symbol on the side of the box. And I came up with 3 distinct groups of medicine. And so I realized that I had counterfeit. And on the website from the manufacturer, they listed a lot number that wasn't really a lot number, not theirs, it was counterfeit. And I matched one of those. So I called the manufacturer and said, I've got these groups and I've been taking this and I have it. And they said, bring it in, we'll make good on it. I said, and there's this other batch. And they said, no, there's not another batch. And I said, there's another batch. And they said, no, there's just this batch, and bring it in. So I immediately called my doctor and insisted that I go see her right away. And I went in, and as soon as I got there, I told her what had happened. And she said, Rick, we need to know what you injected. What was it? I said, oh, I don't know. She goes, we need to know. We've been fighting HIV. We know what that is. You've been alive for 12 years now. But what did you inject? Is it something dangerous? What was it? Because if it was, we need to do something. We need to take some action. I said, okay, I better go find out. So I called the manufacturer, and they said, we can't say anything because we're cooperating with the investigation being done by the FDA. I said, okay, I'll call the FDA. So I called the FDA, and they said, Rick, sorry, we can't say anything because we're in the middle of an investigation, and we can't tell you anything about it. And so that week started a nightmare. And I had this image that they had put hepatitis C in those vials, and I had injected myself with hep C. I, in fact, made my doctor test me for hep C because I was so afraid that that's what happened. I had no idea what was in those vials. And pretty soon, that's all I could think about, and it took all my focus. And that week led to another week, and I was having nightmares, and that week led to a month, and that month led to another month of this, and that led to another month. And then they discovered that there really was a second batch, and there was another month. And 6 months later, I had finally found out what was in the first and second batch. And I had injected in one batch a low dose, a very, very low dose, about 1/16 of the dose of a growth hormone. And based on the contaminants in it, probably produced somewhere overseas. Someone with no immune system really doesn't want to hear the words contaminants or things that are in your medicine that aren't supposed to be there. And the other thing I injected was human chorionic gonadotropin, which is the hormone women make when they're pregnant. It's the basis of the pregnancy test. I'm actually sure if I took it, I would have come up pregnant. And I gained an appreciation after injecting that every day for a month of something that I don't think I would have understood earlier or before that, and why I would suddenly burst into tears during Hallmark commercials. I was just a real wreck for a while, and maybe still recovering after that for a while. It certainly wasn't meant to be injected every day in the way I was injecting it. So I found out what it was, and then I needed to find out how. The next question I had was, how could this happen? And it turns out it's distribution. It's an issue of distribution, and I know you're going to hear more about that today, and it's a very complex issue. And I found out about it in part through a book written by Catherine Eban called Dangerous Doses, and she did, I think, a great job of kind of describing this problem, and it helped me a lot. And then talking to other people and finding out what that distribution issue was. Then I wanted to know who are these people if that's the problem, and I met some of them in a trial in Las Vegas that I testified, and I saw them face to face, and this was a year after, and all those feelings just came back. I mean, here these two guys walk in, and I thought I was past it, and all these feelings came back, and all the anger and disbelief that there were people out there who could put medicine out there for people to take that wasn't real. One, not the medicine that I needed, and two, something potentially dangerous. And they didn't care. They just didn't care. And there they were. And at the end, their company was penalized, and they weren't going to be allowed to get a license to open up a company again in the state of Nevada. But they still walked out and got in their cars and went home. And it was very, very upsetting. Their primary distributor was a group in Florida called the Walkers. This couple, well, his name may have not been Walker, but they were this couple, and Gary, who's over there, who's a character in the book, Dangerous Doses as well, knows this story intimately. But the Walkers, these are bold people. They had a company called Reckus. That was their licensed company name, distributorship. Reckus, R-E-C-K-U-S. That was their company name. They handled the drugs that I injected. Reckus, by the way, is sucker spelled backwards. That was the name of their company. These people are really bad people. Why do they do it? You're going to hear more about that, I think, probably a lot. But they make a lot of money. And like I said, these guys got to just go and walk in their car, and there were some penalties for them, but it was years later before they had to do anything or face anything other than the fact they couldn't open another company in the state of Nevada. I watched an episode of The Sopranos, the only episode I ever watched, because someone said, Rick, you have to watch this episode. And there was a plot device in that episode. Tony Soprano kept saying through the meeting, we've got to meet with the Canadians, and finally meets with the Canadians, and the Canadians said, we need some people whacked. Can you do that for us, Tony? And he goes, sure, what are we going to get? And the Canadians say, we've got this drug called Fosamax, and you can sell it, and you're going to make a lot of money. He goes, how are we going to make a lot of money? He goes, it expired, but new dates on it, you can sell it, you're going to make a lot of money. I was traveling through the Rocky Mountains. I stopped at a pharmacy, picked up my prescription of Lipitor, kept going. About a week later, massive recall of Lipitor in the United States. Thousands and thousands and thousands of units being recalled. I'm pretty good at counterfeits at this point in my life, I thought. I've got a handle on this. I get the lot number, I go to the website, I know right where the FDA is, I know how to look this up. I get the lot number, the expiration date. I go to my bottle. It's a brown bottle with the number of pills with the pharmacy label on it, so I don't have the original packaging, and the pharmacist didn't write the expiration date on the prescription label. I don't know what the chances of getting 3 counterfeits are, but I'd already received 2 different counterfeits perpetrated by 2 different sets of bad people. I still have that bottle of counterfeit or potentially counterfeit Lipitor at home because I don't know, but I wasn't going to take a chance. I was in Istanbul and I got sick and I called my doctor and said, I'm sick. And she told me what drug I needed. And then I thought, I'm not even in the US and I need medicine. So I went to a pharmacy and I got the medicine. And then I went to the other side of the city into a different name on a pharmacy store, and I went in and I bought the same medicine, and then I scrutinized it for what must have been hours. And then when I felt like they were exactly the same, I took them with the hope that they weren't counterfeit. What am I doing here today? Who am I with? Me. I'm here with me, and why I'm hoping, I guess, that today as we get through the panels and we talk about things in tons and in percentages, which can be really overwhelming, that through the day you still remember that ultimately what we're talking about are just individual people. It's not a plot device in a TV series. This is a real thing that happens, and it happens to people who walk into their pharmacy to get their medicine, and it happens to sons and mothers, and it happens to us.